Joining us to discuss is Autry Pruitt, the CEO of New Jersey Journey PAC. Autry, thanks for coming on today. First, let's just start by you telling me, what you're feeling about what you saw yesterday and what played out in Washington, D.C.
If I'm honest with you, what I feel about yesterday is partially sad, but in reality, I am glad that now the left is put on notice. The left is put on notice that we have crazies too. For all this time, for 4 years, all we heard about was crazies on the left and the legacy media's attempt to legitimize them. Now the left understands something that I have been saying. We have just as many crazies as you guys did. And if you continue to call people bigots, fascists, homophobic, prejudiced, transphobic, if you continue to label them all sorts of names, eventually they will lash back. And what you saw yesterday was a lash back, not appropriate, but understandable.
Obviously, this violence has been condemned by Republicans, by Democrats. It's been condemned by Joe Biden, the president-elect. It's been condemned by Donald Trump himself. He released a video. I think it's probably been censored by Twitter and social media on multiple outlets at this point. But he has come out and he told people to be peaceful and to leave. I want to play you, though, a video that Joy-Ann Reid said on her programming on another media outlet about race. Here's what she had to say.
White Americans aren't afraid of the cops. White Americans are never afraid of the cops, even when they're committing insurrection, even when they're engaged in attempting to occupy our capital to steal the votes of people who look like me. Because in their minds, they own this country, they own that capital, they own the cops work for them, and people like me have no damn right to try to elect a president. Because we don't get to pick the president, they get to pick the president. They own the president, they own the White House, they own this country. And so when you think you own it, you own the place, you ain't afraid of the police because the police are you and the police reflect back to them.
Autry, your thoughts on her comments there?
Joy Reid is full of nonsense and is one of the most ridiculous people you will ever meet. Joy Reid sits in a perch making $5 to $10 million a year, acting as if she's the everyday woman out there in the streets. That's not the case. Those individuals yesterday don't believe they own the country. In fact, they believe anything but. You know who owns the country? Try putting a bumper sticker, a Trump bumper sticker on your car, and it gets vandalized and no one's there to help you. What about the boy 3 years ago that was beat up in Chicago? Liberals own the country, elites own the country, banks own the country, Walmart owns the country. Whites don't own the country, blacks don't own the country. The people that own the country are people like her network, CNN, and a host of others that have spent the past entire 4 years, and dare I say their entire corporate lives, slandering Republicans. She's full of nonsense, and this is nothing but fodder for them. This is nothing but play to them.
Newsmax here, we covered the violence that we saw over the summer months. We covered the violence that we saw yesterday. We're trying to be our best to be consistent. It's something that you clearly didn't see during the summer months on those other stations. Autry, stick around if you don't mind, because I want to bring in our panel to continue this conversation. We have Jack Kingston, Trump 2020 campaign surrogate and former Georgia congressman. Also Julio Rivera, the editorial director of the Reactionary Times. He's also a GOP and political strategist. Great to see you guys here. We'd love to get your reaction by showing you this tweet. It's by Congressman Adam Kinzinger. He's a Republican from Illinois. He sent this out just moments ago, so I'll read it so everyone's up to speed here. He says, quote, "It's with a heavy heart I am calling for the sake of our democracy that the 25th Amendment be invoked." That's what he tweeted out there. Jack, I'll go to you first. Your response, again, this is a Republican congressman calling for the 25th, removing the president there. Your thoughts?
Well, number one, I'm an Adam Kinzinger fan, but he has not been a fan of the president of the United States. It's not the first time he's criticized the president. However, I'm going to give him his due on this. If you do invoke the 25th Amendment, the president objects, it begins something like an 8-day process. You would, in fact, if you were successful, nothing would happen until a few hours before the president leaves office. I think this is an emotional message more than a real substantive solution to what some people are perceiving to be the problem. But and you pointed out, Emma, and it's real important. The president did have a really strong message that he put on Facebook about you need to go home. We need peace. And he said it 3 different times throughout his speech yesterday. And of course, the marchers happened after the Save America demonstration. But the president's words were actually squelched by big media and the people that Autry has appropriately said seem to run this country.
Autry, I'll go to you. Your reaction to the congressman's call online for the 25th Amendment. We've also heard from other Democrats in Congress calling for impeachment of Donald Trump.
Well, this is like the 10th time they've called for impeachment, so I'm not going to give any credence to Democrats calling for impeachment. As far as our dear so-called Republican friend, he can drop dead. That's how I feel about it. I am through with these guys. Where is the condemnation after Trump supporters have been beat up in the streets? Do you remember when Trump was first elected? And the mentally challenged young boy whose head was smashed into a toilet? Where was the outrage from them? So these GOPers that could sit so high and mighty, tell them to go. Anyway, we're on TV.
We are on television, and I appreciate you refraining a little bit there. But clearly, I can sense your passion, and I think part of what we saw yesterday was passionate people coming out. We saw peacefully passionate people as well. Julio, your thoughts on this whole situation, and of course, what we saw yesterday and where we're at today.
Listen, this call for the 25th Amendment is another example of weak-kneed republicanism, which cost President Trump this election. Listen, it was no secret that we were going to have an unprecedented set of circumstances in this election. All this action that we're seeing now is after the fact, after the Democrats executed this deal, and there's no real legal path to try to right that. And unfortunately, I got to push back a little bit on what Autry said, saying is we have crazies on our side. I think what we have is people who are fed up with being lied to by the fake news media, fed up by the Democrats working in concert with these weak-kneed Republicans to go ahead and execute the crime of the century, the stealing of the 2020 presidential election. And what you saw was pent-up aggression finally being let out. And the media portraying it this way, to me, is completely hypocritical when you look in contrast to the way that they portrayed these fiery, mostly peaceful protests from the left in the summer. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Autry, I'd love to hear from you. We've got just about 15 seconds left.
It's real simple. It's real simple. No disagreement here. But guess what? If you're lied to for 4 years, if you're called a bigot, a homophobic, a racist for 4 years, if you're called every name of the book, you can't keep your job, you can't bank anywhere, you can't sit down and eat. Guess what? That's going to make you crazy.
All right, Autry Pruitt, with some very passionate words there. We got to get you back on National Report. Thanks so much for taking the time this morning.